Have you ever wondered what it felt like to hear 50,000 people screaming your name, knowing they were also screaming for your blood? We know the legend, the roar of the crowd, the clash of steel, the hero of the arena. But what if the story of the gladiator didn't begin in the Colosseum, but in chains, on a dusty road, miles from Rome? Tonight, we step away from the cheering crowds. We go behind the scenes, onto the training grounds, and into the lives of the most famous warriors of the ancient world. We'll discover the true story of the Roman gladiator. It's a tale of survival, brotherhood, and surprising honor, all in the face of death. I'm so glad you could join me. If you enjoy our journey tonight, a quick like and subscribe really does help our small channel grow. And I'm always curious, where in the world are you listening from tonight? What time is it for you? It's a wonderful thought, picturing our community of history lovers settling in all across the globe. So, find your most comfortable spot, close your eyes if you wish, and let's travel back to the heart of the Roman Empire. Welcome to Sleeping Scribe, where calming history stories help you unwind and gently fall asleep. Tonight, in Bedtime History, we journey beyond the grand spectacle to find the human heart of the gladiator's story. So, find your most comfortable spot, close your eyes if you wish, and let us begin. Our story opens not with the grand, sweeping sounds of a Roman amphitheater, but with the silence that follows. The roar of the crowd fades and is slowly replaced by another sound, a rhythmic, heavy clanking of chains and the low, desperate murmur of many voices. We are on a dusty road, somewhere in the vast Roman territory, following a slave convoy on its way to a new and terrible life. The road is long. For the men shuffling along it, every step is a reminder of a life that is now over. The sun beats down, turning the dust of the road into a fine powder that coats everything. It clings to the rough fabric of their simple tunics, a constant, gritty irritation against the skin. The air is thick and heavy. It smells of sweat and of fear and of the unwashed bodies of men packed too closely together for far too long. In this grim procession, a man is no longer a farmer or a soldier or a father. He is cargo. This path to the arena had many beginnings, but it almost always ended in the same place. The very idea of gladiatorial combat, a spectacle of death for entertainment, has deep and somber roots. It likely began not with the Romans, but with their predecessors on the Italian peninsula, the Etruscans. They practiced a ritual known as a munera, a duty paid to a dead man. At the funeral of a great nobleman, slaves would be forced to fight to the death. Their shed blood was thought to appease the gods and to honor the spirit of the deceased. It was a religious rite, a grim sacrifice. Over time, as Rome grew in power and influence, it absorbed this tradition. But the Romans, with their genius for organization and spectacle, transformed the solemn funeral rite into something else entirely. It became public entertainment, a political tool, a massive state-sponsored industry built on blood and sand. And this industry needed a constant supply of performers. The most common source, especially in the early days of the Republic, was the ever-expanding frontier of the empire. Imagine a Gallic warrior captured after a fierce battle where his tribe was defeated. He fought for his home, for his freedom. Now he finds himself in chains, his language useless, his gods silent. The world he knew has vanished. He is now a prisoner of war, his fate decided by his captors. He is strong and he is trained in combat, which makes him valuable. He is marched for weeks, or even months, across unfamiliar lands. He sees mountains and rivers he never knew existed, all leading him closer to the heart of the empire that crushed his people. He is destined for the arena. Or perhaps he was a Thracian chieftain or a Germanic rebel, men who had known power and respect, now reduced to property. They would arrive in Rome as part of a triumphal procession, paraded through the streets as living trophies of Roman victory. The crowds would cheer at the sight of these defeated enemies, but for the men in chains, it was the ultimate humiliation, a prelude to a new life of servitude and a probable death for the entertainment of those same crowds. The guards who march alongside them shout their orders in harsh, guttural Latin. It's a language the prisoner does not understand, but the meaning is clear from the jab of a spear, butt, or the crack of a whip. Another path to the ludus, the gladiatorial school, ran through the Roman justice system. For a convicted criminal, the sentence of the court could be a fate worse than a simple execution. The worst criminals were sentenced damnatia ad bestias, condemned to the beasts. They would be thrown into the arena, unarmed, to be torn apart by lions, bears, or leopards. It was a horrific death, with no chance of survival. But there was another sentence, a slightly lesser one. Damnatia ad ludum, condemned to the school. This meant a criminal was sentenced to become a gladiator. It was still a death sentence, of course, but it was a delayed one. It offered a sliver of hope, however faint. If he could survive, if he could fight, if he could win, he might one day earn his freedom. This path was for robbers, murderers, and arsonists, men who had broken Roman law and were now forced to pay their debt with their bodies. Yet, not everyone who stepped onto the sand of the arena was forced to be there. By the later years of the Republic and into the imperial era, a new type of gladiator emerged. These were the octorati, free-born men who volunteered for this life. What could possibly drive a man to willingly sell his body and freedom? The motivations were as varied as the men themselves. Some were drowning in debt, seeing the arena as the only way to earn enough money to save their families from ruin. Others were former soldiers, men who knew nothing but combat and were lost in civilian life. The discipline and danger of the ludus felt more like home than a quiet farm, and for some, it was the allure of fame. Gladiators were the superstars of their day. Their names were household words. Their images were scribbled on walls, and their likenesses were carved into pottery. They were admired for their courage and desired for their raw, dangerous appeal. For a young man with nothing to his name, the dream of hearing a crowd chant his name, of earning a fortune, of becoming a legend, could be a powerful temptation. It was a gamble with the highest possible stakes. To become an octoratus, a man had to sign a formal contract, an octoramentum, with a lanista, the owner of a gladiatorial school. This legal document was a surrender of all his rights as a Roman citizen. He agreed to submit to the lanista's absolute authority, and then he swore the oath, the Sacramentum Gladiatorium. This was a sacred vow, a terrifying pledge of absolute obedience. Standing before the lanista, the new recruit would solemnly swear to endure whatever was demanded of him. Uri vincere veroque necari fdu, be burned, to be bound, to be beaten, and to be killed by the sword. With these words, his old life was over. He was no longer a citizen. He had become infames, a person of legal dishonor. In the eyes of the law, He now belonged to the same social class as actors, prostitutes, and pimps. It was a strange paradox. He could be adored by the masses, his victories celebrated, but in the rigid social structure of Rome, he was an outcast. He could not vote, he could not hold public office, and his testimony in court was considered unreliable. He was a living contradiction, a celebrated pariah. For the lanista, this new recruit was an investment. A promising slave, captured in a distant war, could be purchased for a significant sum. The lanista was a businessman, and his product was violence. He would spend a great deal of money to acquire, house, feed, and train his fighters. He did so with the expectation of a handsome return, renting them out to the organizers of the games for a fee. A champion gladiator could make his lanista a very wealthy man. This meant that while the life was brutal, the lanista had a vested interest in keeping his investments alive and healthy, at least until they stepped into the arena. For the man in chains, the final leg of the journey was often the worst. He is part of a long, shuffling line of men, their ankles chained together. They march for hundreds of miles under the watchful eyes of guards. The nights are cold, the days are hot, food is scarce, and water is precious. The weak and the sick are a liability. Many do not survive the journey. Disease, exhaustion, or simple despair claim them long before they ever see a training sword. This initial period was a brutal form of natural selection, a seasoning that weeded out those who were not strong enough to endure what was to come. Then, finally, in the distance, he sees it, the imposing, unfamiliar architecture of a Roman city. Its scale is unlike anything he has ever seen. The stone buildings seem to touch the sky, the noise of its streets, a constant roar of carts, animals, and people, is overwhelming. This is the heart of the empire that owns him now. He is marched through its crowded streets, a spectacle for the citizens. They point, they jeer, they stare with a mixture of pity and morbid curiosity. And somewhere in this vast, stone labyrinth, his new home and his new prison is waiting. The gates of the ludus are just ahead. The heavy wooden gates of the ludus groan open and then slam shut behind the new arrivals. The sound is final. It echoes off the high stone walls, a stark announcement that the outside world is gone. For the new recruit, the Tyranus, this is his entire world now. The first thing he notices is how the walls block out the sun, casting the large central yard into shadow for much of the day. The architecture is not meant to be beautiful. It is meant to contain. It is a fortress designed to keep its valuable and dangerous inhabitants from ever leaving. Windows are small and barred. The only way in or out is through that one heavily guarded gate. The heart of the ludus is the central practice arena. It is a miniature version of the Colosseum or any other amphitheater in the empire. The ground is covered in thick, soft sand, just like the real thing. This sand, the arena, is where he will spend nearly every waking moment. And from the moment he enters, he hears it, the constant, rhythmic clash of weapons, the thud of wooden swords against practice posts, the grunts of exertion, and the sharp, barking commands of the trainers. This is the soundtrack of his new life. A figure of authority approaches. This is the lanista, the owner and absolute master of the school. He might be a wealthy businessman, or perhaps a tough, scarred former gladiator who fought his way to freedom and fortune. He looks over the new property with a practiced, calculating eye. He is not seeing men, he is seeing potential. He assesses their height, their weight, their muscle. He orders them to move, to lift, to show their strength. A strong, heavily built man might be destined for one style of fighting, a smaller, quicker man for another. It is a cold, businesslike inspection, like a butcher examining livestock. Once inspected, the new recruits are herded towards their living quarters. There are no private rooms here. They are led to small, shared cells, often no larger than 3 or 4 square meters. The floors are cold stone, and the beds are simple straw pallets. There might be 4 or even 6 men crammed into this tiny space. The air is stale, thick with the smell of sweat and old sawdust from the training yard, and the simmering scent of the communal cooking fires. This is where he will eat and sleep and try to find a moment's peace in a world built on violence and anxiety. A rigid hierarchy is established from the very first day. At the top are the veterani, the veteran gladiators. These are the survivors, the champions. Their bodies are maps of old wounds, covered in the scars of a dozen battles. They carry themselves with a quiet confidence and a dangerous authority. They get the best food, the better sleeping spots, and the respect of everyone in the ludus. They are the kings of this small, brutal kingdom. At the very bottom are the novici, the newcomers. They are the lowest of the low. They are met with suspicion and often with casual cruelty. They must learn the rules quickly or suffer the consequences. Fights over food or a perceived insult are common. It is another part of the hardening process, teaching them to be constantly on guard, to be aggressive, to survive in a community of killers. Discipline is absolute, and it is brutally enforced. The trainers, known as doctors, are the enforcers. Many of them are retired champions, men who were too old or too injured to fight, but too valuable to discard. They carry whips or wooden rods, and they do not hesitate to use them for any infraction. A lazy training exercise, a moment of defiance, or a failure to follow an order would be met with immediate, sharp pain. Fear is a tool used just as skillfully as a sword or a shield. It sharpens the mind and focuses the body. But the ludus is not just a collection of fighters and trainers. It is a complex organization, a self-sufficient community. There are cooks who prepare the simple, energy-rich meals. There are armorers, their forges glowing day and night, constantly repairing the dented helmets and blunted swords used for training. And most importantly, there are the medici, the doctors. They are highly skilled physicians, tasked with patching up the endless injuries that occur during the relentless training. A gladiator is a valuable asset, and his health is paramount to the lanista's business. A broken bone or a deep gash is not a reason to discard a man, but a problem to be solved by the medical staff. The final step in this initial, shocking transformation is the most personal. The new recruit is stripped of his past, piece by piece. His clothes are taken, replaced by the simple tunic of the school. His possessions are gone, and finally, his name is taken from him. A German warrior named Alaric, or a Roman debtor named Marcus, ceases to exist. He is given a new name, a fighting name, something fierce, like Ursus, the bear, or simple, like Crixus, or something that described his fighting style, like Secutor. This is the final act of erasure. His old identity is buried. He is no longer who he was. He is a gladiator now, and nothing else. As the first light of dawn filters into the gladiator's cell, the day begins. There is no gentle waking. The day starts with a shout, and the routine is immediate and relentless. The purpose of the ludus is to transform a man's body into a weapon, and to harden his soul until it is as strong as the steel he will soon carry. This process is grueling, repetitive, and all-consuming. It starts from the moment he wakes and does not end until he collapses, exhausted, onto his straw pallet at night. The morning is dedicated to pure physical conditioning. Before a man can learn to fight with a sword, he must first master his own body. The Tyrones are run for miles around the compound, their bare feet pounding against the hard-packed earth. They lift heavy weights, not crafted iron dumbbells, but rough, heavy stones or lead blocks. They perform endless rounds of calisthenics, exercises designed to build raw strength and endurance in every muscle. The burn in their arms and legs becomes a constant companion, a dull ache that never truly goes away. At the center of all this initial training is a simple, unassuming piece of equipment, the payless. It is a wooden post, a little taller than a man, fixed firmly in the ground of the training yard. This post is the gladiator's first and most important opponent. Each recruit is given a rudis, a heavy wooden sword that is often twice the weight of a real gladius, and a heavy shield woven from wicker. The practice of fighting the payless is called armatura, and it is the foundation of everything. For hours on end, the recruits attack the post. The sound of their wooden swords thudding against the wood is a constant, percussive rhythm throughout the ludus. This is not about mindless aggression. It is a science. The doctors, the trainers, walk among them, their eyes missing nothing. They teach the recruits the precise footwork, the perfect way to hold the shield, the exact angle of a strike. They teach them to move with balance and purpose, to always protect their vital organs, to generate power from their hips, not just their arms. Every movement is broken down, practiced thousands of times, until it is no longer a conscious thought. It becomes pure muscle memory. These doctors are the true masters of the school. A doctor might specialize in a particular style of combat. He may have been a famous retiarius in his day, and now he teaches a new generation how to wield the net and trident. Another might be a master of the heavy shield and sword. They are harsh, demanding teachers because they know that a mistake in the training yard will only result in a beating. A mistake in the real arena will result in death. Their sharp, commanding voices bark orders, correct a flawed stance, and offer grudging praise for a well-executed move. To fuel this incredible physical exertion, the gladiators are fed a very specific diet. They are not eating lean meats and fine wines. Their diet is simple, cheap, and effective. They consume vast quantities of carbohydrates. Their staple food is barley, often served as a thick, bland porridge. They also eat beans and simple, coarse bread. This diet earned them a nickname, Hordri, which literally means the barley men. Modern analysis of gladiator remains has confirmed this ancient account. Their bones show a high level of strontium, which is consistent with a largely vegetarian, carbohydrate-heavy diet. The purpose of this diet was not to create the chiseled, lean physique of a modern athlete. It was to build a layer of subcutaneous fat over their muscles. This layer of fat served a crucial purpose. In the arena, a fighter would inevitably suffer cuts. A superficial cut on a lean man might immediately hit a nerve or a major blood vessel, incapacitating him. But for a barley man, a shallow cut would slice through the fat layer first, protecting the vital structures underneath. It increased their survivability, allowing them to endure more punishment and continue fighting. This made for a better, longer, and more exciting show for the crowd. The health of these men, these valuable assets, was a top priority. The medical care within Aludus was often better than what a common Roman citizen could expect. The famous physician, Galen, one of the most brilliant medical minds of the ancient world, began his career as a medicus at a gladiator school in his home city of Pergamum. He learned a tremendous amount about anatomy, surgery, and trauma care by treating the gladiators' wounds. Doctors in the ludus knew how to set broken bones, stitch deep wounds, and prevent infection. They were experts in keeping these fighting machines in working order. The training schedule is relentless. It lasts all day, from dawn until dusk, with only short breaks for meals. The goal is twofold. First, it is to achieve peak physical condition. The men become incredibly strong, with an endurance that is almost superhuman. But the second goal is psychological. The endless repetition, the constant physical stress, the brutal discipline, all serve to desensitize the man to violence. He learns to ignore pain. He learns to push his body far beyond its normal limits. The training hardens the soul. It forges a new kind of mind, one that can function calmly in the face of mortal danger. It is a long, grueling process of breaking a man down and then rebuilding him into something new, something the crowd will pay to see. After weeks, or even months, of relentless physical conditioning, the Tyrones has been transformed. His body is hard, his endurance is high, and his mind has begun to accept the brutal reality of his new life. Now, he is ready for the next stage. He is ready to learn the specific art of killing that will define him. He is ready to be assigned his fighting style. This is not a choice he gets to make. It is a decision made for him by the lanista and the doctors. His fate is sealed by their expert eyes. They assess his body type with a cold, practical logic. Is he tall and muscular? A man with great physical strength and a solid frame? He might be suited to become a myrmilo or a secutor, the heavily armored titans of the arena. Is he smaller, but exceptionally fast and agile? Then perhaps he is destined to be a retiarius, the netman who relies on speed and cunning rather than brute force. Every physical attribute is considered, and the man is assigned to a doctor who specializes in the chosen style. From this point on, his training becomes highly specific. He might be assigned to become a retiarius, the netman. This is one of the most iconic and unusual types of gladiator. The retiarius is lightly armored. He wears no helmet and no shield. His only protection is a metal guard on his shoulder, the gallerus, and some padding on his arm. His weapons are those of a fisherman. In one hand, he carries a long, sharp trident, and in the other, a weighted net, the retifi. He also has a small dagger, a pugio, tucked into his belt as a last resort. His strategy is one of evasion and entanglement. He must dance around his opponent, looking for the perfect moment to cast his net. If he succeeds, he can trip and ensnare his foe, leaving him vulnerable to the trident. It is a style that requires immense speed, agility, and tactical thinking. Or he might be destined to be the opponent of the resist, the secutor, the pursuer. This class of gladiator was designed for one purpose, and one purpose only: to hunt and kill the retiarius. The secutor is heavily armed. He carries a large, rectangular shield, the scutum, just like a Roman legionary, and a short, deadly sword, the gladius. But his most distinctive feature is his helmet. It is completely smooth and rounded, with only 2 small eye holes. This design is purely functional. It has no crests or ridges, offering nothing for the Retiarius's net to snag on. The Secutor's strategy is relentless pressure. He must constantly move forward, using his large shield to block the trident and corner the faster Retiarius, where his sword will be lethal. Perhaps his strong frame marks him as a Mermello. This is another heavyweight fighter, often pitted against the Threx or the Hoplomachus. The Mermello is also armed with a scutum and gladius. His large helmet is distinguished by a prominent, angular crest that is said to resemble a fish, which gives him his name from the Greek word for a type of sea fish, mormulos. He is a walking fortress of bronze and wood, a powerful, straightforward fighter who relies on strength and solid defense. A different body type might lead him to become a Threx or a Thracian. This style is based on the warriors of Thrace, an ancient enemy of Rome. The Threx carries a small, square shield called a parmula, which offers less protection but allows for greater mobility. His most defining weapon is the Sika, a short, curved sword. This curved blade is a vicious weapon designed specifically to get around the edges of an opponent's shield and strike at their unprotected back or legs. The Threx is an aggressive, attacking fighter. He might also become a Hoplomachus, named after the Greek hoplite warrior. This gladiator is equipped with a spear for fighting at a distance and a sword for when the fighting gets close. He carries a small, round shield and wears heavy armor on his legs, called greaves. He is a versatile fighter, capable of both offense and defense, and his matchups against the Mermello were classic contests of different military traditions, Greek versus Roman. These pairings were not random. They were a form of deadly theater, carefully orchestrated for maximum entertainment value. The organizers of the games, the editors, would deliberately pit contrasting styles against each other. The heavy, armored Mermello against the agile, lightly armed Threx, the net-wielding Retiarius against his dedicated pursuer, the Secutor. It was a spectacle of opposites, agility versus strength, defense versus attack. This ensured a dynamic and unpredictable show, which is what kept the crowds coming back for more. For most of his training, the recruit uses the heavy wooden rudies, but as he masters his style and the day of his first real fight approaches, there comes a momentous day. He is taken to the school's armory, a room filled with the tools of his trade, and for the first time, he handles the real weapons, the arma. He feels the sharp, deadly edge of a real gladius. He feels the unfamiliar balance of a perfectly weighted trident. The light from the forge glints off the polished bronze and steel. The sound of a blacksmith's hammer, a constant background noise in the ludus, suddenly takes on a new, more personal meaning. These men are repairing the very armor he might soon wear. Then comes the shock of the real armor. A bronze helmet is placed over his head for the first time. It is cold and incredibly heavy. The world becomes a narrow slit of vision. His hearing is muffled by the metal. The full weight of the armor, which could be over 15 or even 20 kilograms, is a crushing burden. It requires a whole new level of endurance and specific training just to be able to move and fight effectively under such a load. He feels the rough leather grip of his sword, the weight of the shield on his arm. It all feels terribly and dangerously real now. His training is almost complete. He is no longer just a man. He has been forged, body and soul, into a specific type of gladiator. His weapon has been chosen, and his fate has been sealed. It's a world almost impossible to imagine. If you were forced to choose from those ancient fighting styles, which one calls to you the most? The agile Retiarius with his net, or the heavily armored Murmillo? Let me know in the comments below. The initial brutal shock of the ludus has begun to fade. It has not lessened in its harshness, but it has become familiar. The raw terror of the newcomer is slowly replaced by the grim acceptance of the survivor. The body has been forged in the fires of relentless training. Now we look deeper, past the sweat and the strain of the practice yard, and into the heart of the community it created. We explore the strange and complex society of the condemned, a life lived in a wolf pack, bound by shared danger and governed by the unwritten laws of the sand. Within the high walls of the ludus, a new kind of society takes root. It is a world with its own rules, its own leaders, and its own unique form of honor. The gladiators within a single school are known as a familia gladiatoria. The word familia suggests a family, and in a way, they are one. A brutal, dysfunctional family, perhaps, but one bound together by a shared, extraordinary fate. They live together, eat together, train together, and bleed together, and bleed together. It has a strict pecking order. At the very top are the veterani, the veterans. These are the men who have walked onto the hot sand of the arena time and time again, and have walked out alive. Their bodies are living histories of their trade, marked with the pale, jagged lines of old scars. Each one tells a story of a near miss, a hard-won victory. They move with a deep, quiet confidence that the newer recruits can only look upon with awe. Survival has earned them status, and with that status comes privilege. While the novices, the tyrones, sleep on simple straw pallets, a veteran might have a more comfortable bed. While they drink water, he might be given spiced wine, the sweet and expensive aroma drifting from his table in the mess hall, a constant reminder of his superior position. They often have personal slaves, assigned by the lanista to tend to their needs, to massage their aching muscles, and to help them with their armor. You might see a primus palis, a top-ranked gladiator, sitting calmly while a slave carefully treats an old wound, his face a mask of indifference to the pain. But their role is not just one of privilege. They are the keepers of order. They serve as mentors to the younger fighters, offering a gruff word of advice, a subtle correction to a stance, or a harsh lesson in respect. They are also the enforcers of discipline. The trainers cannot be everywhere at once, and it is often the veterans who ensure the unwritten rules of the ludus are obeyed. A new recruit who gets too arrogant, or who breaks the code of the familia, will likely face the quiet and very effective wrath of a veteran long before a trainer's whip is ever raised. At the bottom of this ladder are the tyrones. Their life is one of constant struggle and submission. They perform the menial chores of the compound, cleaning the stables or carrying water. They are subject to the authority of everyone above them, from the lanista down to the lowest-ranking veteran. They must watch, and they must learn, and they must endure. Their journey up the ladder begins with a single, terrifying step. Their first fight in the arena. If a tyrannus survives and wins his first match, he earns a new rank. He becomes a secundus, palis, a second sword. He is no longer a complete novice. He has proven himself. With more victories, he can continue to climb, aiming for the ultimate title, primus palis, the first sword. He is the champion, the undisputed king of the ludus. When a primus palis walks through the training yard, a hush falls. Other gladiators will give a deferential nod, stepping aside to let him pass. His position has been earned in blood, and it is respected by all. Overseeing this entire structure is the lanista. His power is absolute. He can sell a gladiator, rent him out for the games, or even condemn him to death. But his relationship with his fighters, especially his top performers, is complex. He is not just a master, but also a manager. A champion gladiator is an immensely valuable asset, a source of huge income and prestige. The lanista might foster a paternalistic relationship with his stars, offering them rewards, better conditions, and even a degree of trust. It is a bond born of mutual need. The gladiator needs the lanista for a chance to survive and win glory. The lanista needs the gladiator for his business to prosper. The doctors, the trainers, occupy a unique space in this hierarchy. They are figures of both fear and respect. Their whip is a constant threat. Their commands are law. Yet they hold the keys to survival. A gladiator knows that the grueling, painful lessons taught by his doctor are the very things that might keep him alive in the arena. They are the masters of the craft, and their knowledge is priceless. A bond of professional respect, forged in endless hours of shared exertion, often forms between a fighter and his trainer. Amidst this harsh discipline and rigid hierarchy, something remarkable often happens. True bonds of friendship are formed. This bond was known as contubernium, a word that originally meant the sharing of a tent by soldiers. Within the ludus, it meant the sharing of a cell, the sharing of a life. Two men, paired as training partners, or simply living side by side in a cramped space, would come to rely on each other. They would see each other's fears and share in each other's small triumphs. After a long day, in the relative quiet of the cells, you would hear the low murmur of conversation. You might see two men, their bodies aching with exhaustion, sharing a quiet understanding, or playing a simple game with dice to pass the time. But this friendship is always shadowed by a terrible, unspoken truth. The organizers of the games had the final say in who fought whom. It was not unheard of for two men who had formed a deep bond of contubernium to be chosen as opponents. Two friends who had trained together and protected each other within the ludus could be forced to walk out onto the sand and try to kill one another. It is a cruel, psychological twist that is almost impossible to imagine. The ultimate test of the gladiator's hardened soul. And yet, despite being slaves and prisoners, locked away from the world, these men were not forgotten. They were famous. We know from graffiti preserved in the volcanic ash of Pompeii that gladiators had huge fan followings. One particular fighter was given the title Suspirium Puellarum, the sigh of the girls. He was a heartthrob, a celebrity. Imagine the strange reality of that. Living a life of brutal discipline and constant danger, only to hear that on the walls of the city, women are writing about you as the object of their desire. It is just one of the many contradictions at the heart of a gladiator's life. The world of the ludus runs on a rhythm as strict and unchanging as the rising and setting of the sun. Every day is a copy of the one before, a highly disciplined routine designed to maximize a fighter's potential and leave no room for idleness or dissent. There is no personal freedom here. A man's time is not his own. It belongs to the lanista, and it is structured from the first moment of consciousness to the last. The day begins at dawn. There is no gentle awakening. A jarring sound, perhaps a loud, clanging bell, or the sharp blast of a horn, echoes through the compound. It is the signal to rise. There is no lingering in bed. The men quickly move from their cells to the communal mess hall for the first meal of the day. Breakfast is simple and functional. A bowl of hot porridge, made from barley or wheat, designed to provide the energy for the grueling morning ahead. It is eaten quickly and without ceremony. The morning sessions are the most physically demanding. This is the time for pure conditioning, running, lifting, and endless calisthenics to push the body to its limits. In the cool morning air of the training yard, you would see the steam rising from the straining bodies of the gladiators as they work. After the conditioning, the men move to the pales, the wooden training post. For hours, they practice their strikes, their blocks, their footwork. The sounds of the heavy wooden swords thudding against the posts, providing a constant beat to the morning's activities. The main meal of the day is taken at midday. This is the largest meal, again centered on the carbohydrate-heavy fare of barley, beans, and bread. It is designed to replenish the vast amount of energy burned during the morning and to maintain that crucial layer of body fat. Though they are slaves, their diet is a science. A typical field slave might be given just enough food to survive and work. But a gladiator is a high-performance athlete. He is fed for optimal performance. His body is his lanista's investment, and it is fueled with care. The afternoon brings a change in focus. This is often the time for mock combat, the Colosseum. Gladiators pair off, using blunted or wooden weapons, to engage in sparring sessions. This is a chance to put the endless drills into practice against a moving, thinking opponent. These sessions are closely watched by the doctors. They walk the perimeter of the practice arena, their sharp eyes catching every mistake. They shout corrections, praise a clever move, and assess the progress of each fighter. Though the weapons are not sharp, the combat is intense. It is a competition for status within the familia, a chance to prove one's skill and courage. As the afternoon wears on, a portion of time is set aside for a critical and often overlooked skill: the maintenance of weapons and armor. Each gladiator is responsible for his own training gear. He learns to care for it with a meticulous attention to detail. This is a quiet, ritualistic time. You would see a man sitting in the fading light, systematically cleaning and oiling a leather strap, or polishing his helmet until it gleams. He checks the grip of his wooden sword, the integrity of his wicker shield. He knows that in the arena, a broken strap or a faulty piece of armor could mean the difference between life and death. This is a life-saving skill. When the training is finally done for the day, a profound physical exhaustion settles over the men. The evenings are a time for recovery. Massage with oil is a common practice, administered by the schools, slaves, or medical staff. It is essential for soothing the brutally overworked muscles and helping the body to heal. This is one of the few moments of something approaching comfort in their day. The remaining hours of the evening are for limited social interaction. The men retreat to their cells. Some might talk quietly, sharing stories or rumors. Others might play games of chance, like knucklebones or dice, gambling for tiny stakes to break the monotony. But for the most part, it is a time of quiet contemplation. The day has been a cycle of controlled violence and exertion. Now, there is only the feeling of a body pushed to its absolute limit, and the knowledge that tomorrow, when the horn blows at dawn, it will all begin again. There is a deep and fascinating contradiction at the very core of the gladiator's existence. In the rigid, class-obsessed world of Roman society, he occupies two completely opposite positions at the same time. He is both a legal outcast and a celebrated superstar, a pariah and an idol. Legally, every gladiator, whether a volunteer or a slave, was branded with the status of infamia. This was a form of legal dishonor. It meant he was on the lowest rung of the social ladder. He had no rights. He could not vote in an election. He could not hold any form of public office. He could not even make a legal will to pass on his meager possessions. In the eyes of Roman law, he was a non-person, socially dead. The respectable upper classes of Roman society, the senators and the equestrians, would look down on him as something unclean, a necessary evil for the entertainment of the masses. But if you walked through the streets of Rome or any other city in the empire, you would see a very different story. The gladiator was everywhere. His image was a common motif in art and decoration. You would find him on the beautiful, intricate mosaics that decorated the floors of wealthy villas. His likeness was painted onto pottery, and his helmeted form was used to create popular oil lamps. Children played with small clay figurines of famous gladiators, their own miniature heroes of the arena, and on the public walls everywhere there was graffiti. Just like modern sports fans, Romans would scribble the names of their favorite fighters. They would boast of their victories and praise their skill and courage. A winning gladiator could amass a huge and passionate fan following. They were the most famous people of their time, their names more widely known than those of most politicians or poets. This fame had a very personal and often scandalous dimension. Gladiators were seen as symbols of ultimate masculinity, and they had many female admirers. It was an open secret that some wealthy Roman matrons, the wives of powerful and respectable men, would pay enormous sums of money for a private meeting with a champion fighter. The scent of expensive perfume from a visiting admirer was likely a familiar smell in the administrative offices of the ludus. The obsession reached truly bizarre levels. The sweat of a victorious gladiator was considered a powerful status symbol, and even an aphrodisiac. Attendants would use a special tool, a strigil, to scrape the mixture of sweat, dirt, and oil from a fighter's body after a match. This substance was then decanted into small vials and sold for high prices to adoring female fans outside the amphitheater. For the gladiator himself, this fame could translate into something much more tangible: prize money. A victorious fighter would be awarded a sum of money, and though the lanista would take a large cut, the gladiator was often allowed to keep a portion. This was a powerful motivator. With his earnings, he could buy small comforts within the ludus, better food, or the services of a slave. And if he was incredibly successful and incredibly lucky, he might even save enough money to one day buy his own freedom. The jingle of coins was a rare and precious sound, a symbol not just of victory, but of hope. This paradox was lived by every man in the ludus. He was legally dead, yet worshipped by the masses. He was shunned by the elite, but his image was in their homes. He was a slave, but he was also a sex symbol. Perhaps nothing illustrates this strange reality better than the actions of the emperors themselves. The Emperor Commodus, whose reign was a study in vanity and cruelty, was obsessed with the arena. He would often enter the games himself, dressed as a gladiator, to fight. Of course, his opponents were usually terrified, poorly armed amateurs, or even captives tied to a post. But the very fact that the most powerful man in the world wanted to be a gladiator shows the incredible hold they had on the Roman imagination. The endless rhythm of training has a purpose. The hierarchy, the discipline, the diet. It all leads to one single, terrifying point: the games. When the editor, the sponsor of the games, has contracted the lanista for a group of his fighters, a change comes over the ludus. The familiar routine continues, but now it is charged with a new and palpable tension. The abstract possibility of death is about to become very, very real. The final 24 hours are a period of ritual and intense psychological preparation. The night before the games, a special event is held. It is the Cena Libre, the free dinner. This is a lavish public banquet, held for the gladiators who are scheduled to fight the next day. The men are taken from the ludus, under guard, and brought to a hall where a magnificent feast is laid out. There are roasted meats, fine wines, and delicacies they would never see inside the school. It is a stark, almost cruel, contrast to their daily diet of barley gruel. But this is not a private affair. The public is invited to come and watch. The hall would be crowded with spectators, all craning their necks to get a good look at the men who will offer them blood sport on the morrow. For gamblers, it is a final chance to inspect the merchandise, to assess the physical condition and mental state of the fighters before placing their final bets. The sound of the crowd is a constant murmur, the noise of 100 quiet conversations, all about the men sitting at the table. For the gladiators themselves, the experience of the Cena Libre is complex. Some, with an iron will or a fatalistic acceptance of their fate, would treat it as a true last meal. They would eat and drink their fill, enjoying one final night of pleasure before facing the judgment of the arena. But for many others, especially the novices facing their first fight, the tension and fear would make it impossible to eat. They would sit before a plate of rich food, their stomach churning, their mind already on their opponent. This is also a time for settling affairs. A man might speak quietly to a trusted friend, one of the contubernium, who is not fighting tomorrow. He might entrust him with a small pouch of coins, his winnings, with instructions on where to send it if he does not return. Or he might have a message for a loved one outside the walls. These are the quiet, somber moments of preparation for death. Many gladiators would seek spiritual comfort. They would pray to Nemesis, the powerful goddess of fate, balance, and divine retribution. Every amphitheater had a small shrine dedicated to her. She was the arbiter of the arena, the one who ensured that fate, for better or worse, would run its course. A fighter might light a stick of incense at her altar, the sweet, heavy smoke curling into the air as he offered a silent prayer, not for victory perhaps, but for a fair fight and for the courage to face whatever comes. Back in the ludus that night, the men perform the final ritualistic acts of preparation. They give their armor and weapons a final polish. A helmet is rubbed until it shines. The edge of a blade is tested carefully with a thumb. These are not just practical tasks. They are a form of meditation, a way to focus the mind, to calm the nerves, and to connect with the tools that will determine their survival. The mood in the cells on this last night is unlike any other. There is no laughter, no games of dice. There is a profound, echoing silence, thick with unspoken fears. A man might lie on his pallet, staring into the darkness, visualizing his opponent. He would rehearse every move, every counter, every technique his doctor had ever taught him. He would try to control his breathing, to master the fear that threatens to overwhelm him. Sleep, if it comes at all, is likely to be shallow and restless, filled with the sounds of his nervous comrades and the looming thought of the morning, and the roar of the crowd that awaits him. The idea of that public dinner, the Cena Lebra, is so fascinating. A last feast before the world. What do you think would be going through your mind at that table? A thought to ponder as we continue our journey. The final night is over. The restless sleep, filled with shadows and muffled sounds, gives way to a gray and quiet dawn. But today is different. The usual rhythm of the ludus is broken. There is a new energy in the air, a sharp electric tension that hangs over every moment. This is the day of the games. The day that all the training, all the pain, and all the waiting has led to. For the gladiator, it is the day his fate will be written for all to see on the hot sand of the arena before the roar of the crowd. The morning begins not with the familiar clang of training weapons, but with a different kind of preparation. The gladiators who are to fight are separated from the others. They are washed and oiled. Their simple, rough tunics are taken away. In their place, they are given magnificent, ornate robes, a toga picta, perhaps, a garment dyed a rich purple and embroidered with gold thread, normally reserved for triumphant generals or the emperor himself. For this one day, these slaves, these condemned men, are to be dressed as kings. Then they are led from the familiar confines of the ludus out into the bright, noisy streets of the city. The games always began with the pampa, a grand procession that wound its way through the city to the amphitheater. It is a glorious, theatrical parade, a piece of public pageantry designed to whip the crowd into a frenzy of anticipation. At the head of the procession walks the editor, the sponsor of the games. He is a wealthy magistrate, or perhaps even the emperor, basking in the adoration of the people. The air is filled with music, not the simple, rhythmic music of the training yard, but a bombastic, powerful sound. Musicians play on booming trumpets, shrill flutes, and the incredible hydraulic organ, a marvel of Roman engineering whose sound could fill the entire city. Attendants march alongside them, carrying large, painted signs. On these signs are the details of the day's events and the names of the gladiators who will fight. To see your own name carried high for the entire city to read is a strange and sobering experience. Finally, the procession enters the amphitheater itself. For a gladiator entering the Colosseum for the first time, the sight is almost beyond comprehension. After the dark, narrow tunnels of the entrance, he steps into a vast bowl of blinding sunlight, a sea of humanity. 50,000 or even 80,000 people rises up on all sides, a wall of faces and color and noise. The roar of the crowd is a physical thing. It presses in on you, a wave of sound that vibrates deep in your chest. The air is thick with the smell of the crowd, but also with the scent of perfumed water, which is sprayed into the stands to please the spectators. The gladiators, in their fine robes, parade around the edge of the arena floor. The freshly raked sand feels soft and deep under their feet. This is their stage. They make a full lap, allowing every single person in the massive crowd to see them, to cheer for their favorites, and to jeer at the villains. The crowd is a living entity, waving colored cloths and shouting encouragement. The procession comes to a halt before the imperial box, where the emperor or the editor sits in splendor, and here the gladiators offer their famous salute. They raise their arms, and in one voice they cry out the legendary words, Av Imperator, Moratori, Te Salutant, Hail, Emperor. Those who are about to die salute you. It is a moment of profound and chilling theater. acknowledging their own mortality before the man who holds their lives in his hands. While some historians now believe this salute may have been a rare, or even a one-time occurrence, its legend perfectly captures the grim reality of this moment. With the salute delivered, and the crowd whipped into a fever pitch, the pageantry is over. The gladiators are led from the bright arena, their ornate robes soon to be discarded. They descend into the corridors that run beneath the stands. The roar of the crowd begins to fade, replaced by the cool, quiet dark. Their brief moment as kings is over. Now, they must wait for their moment as fighters. The world of dazzling light and deafening noise vanishes. It is replaced by a realm of shadows and echoes. The gladiator descends into the hypogeum, the vast two-level network of tunnels and chambers that lies beneath the floor of the Colosseum. This is the backstage of the games, a hidden world as complex and marvelous as the arena above. It is a labyrinth of corridors, animal pens, and holding cells, all lit by the low, flickering light of oil lamps that cast long, dancing shadows on the stone walls. This subterranean world was a masterpiece of engineering added to the Colosseum by the Emperor Domitian. It allowed for the most incredible stagecraft. A complex series of elevators and trapdoors connected this underworld directly to the arena floor. Through these wild animals and fully armed gladiators could be hoisted up, appearing as if from nowhere, to the delight and astonishment of the crowd. But for the man waiting below, it is a place of profound tension. The air is cool and damp, and thick with a unique and unforgettable smell. It is the smell of wild, dangerous animals, the musky scent of lions and bears held in their pens, the area. It is the smell of sawdust and oil, and the sharp, metallic temps of nervous sweat. The claustrophobic feeling is immense, with low ceilings and narrow passageways all around. The gladiators do not fight first. The games have a schedule. The morning is often reserved for the Venetians, the wild animal hunts, and so, for hours, the gladiator must wait. He sits in a holding cell, listening to the muffled thunder from above. He cannot see what is happening, but he can hear it. He hears the roar of the crowd as a beast is released. He hears the screams and the frantic music. It is a constant, terrifying reminder of the purpose of this place. And somewhere, in a nearby pen, he might hear the low, rumbling roar of a lion, a sound that echoes through the stone tunnels and seems to shake the very ground. During this long wait, attendants move through the tunnels. They bring the gladiators their armor, piece by piece, the heavy greaves for the legs, the manica for the arm, and finally, the helmet. The world becomes a narrow field of vision. His hearing is distorted by the bronze. He is now encased in the tools of his trade. He is no longer a man in a robe. He is a gladiator, ready for his purpose. In these final moments, a man might exchange a few quiet words with a comrade who is also waiting, a nod of mutual respect, a shared look of understanding, or he might simply retreat into himself, seeking a quiet corner to focus his mind, to banish all thoughts except the fight to come. The referees, the summa rudis and secunda rudis, make their final inspections. They check the straps on the armor, the quality of the weapons. Everything must be in order. Then he hears it, the creak and rumble of a wooden lift nearby. He sees a pair of fighters, or a caged leopard, being loaded onto a platform. He watches as a team of slaves turns a massive capstan, their muscles straining, pulling on the thick ropes that hoist the platform upwards. It rises into the darkness, and then disappears through a square of light high above, followed by a fresh wave of sound from the crowd. He knows his turn is coming. The wait is almost over. The signal is given. A gate creaks open, and an attendant beckons. It is time. The gladiator walks from his holding cell and steps onto the wooden platform of the lift. For a moment, there is only the darkness of the shaft around him and the rough feel of the wooden floor beneath his feet. Then, with a lurch, it begins to move. He rises up from the cool darkness, ascending towards the light and the noise. The final few feet are a blinding rush of sensory overload. He emerges into the brilliant, hot sun of the arena. The light reflects off his opponent's helmet across the sand. The roar of the 50,000 spectators hits him like a physical blow, a wall of sound so immense it is hard to think. This is the moment, the culmination of everything. The training, the fear, the hope, it all comes down to this. But this is not a chaotic brawl. Gladiatorial combat is a martial art, with rules and officials. In the arena, standing near the fighters, are the referees. The senior referee, the summa rudis, is often a respected, retired gladiator himself. He holds a long staff, the rudis, and with it, he can control the flow of the fight. He can pause the action to separate the fighters, to address an equipment failure, or to penalize an illegal move. His presence turns the fight from a simple slaughter into a disciplined, if deadly, contest. The fight begins. The musicians who played during the procession now play a different tune. Their music follows the action, the tempo rising to a frantic pace during a flurry of blows and falling during a tense standoff. The two gladiators, typically of different but carefully balanced types, begin to circle each other. They are testing each other's defenses, looking for an opening. The fight is a grueling test of stamina. The heavy armor, weighing as much as 20 kilograms, becomes an incredible burden under the hot sun. Every movement is exhausting. A fighter's breath comes in ragged, desperate gasps. His heart pounds against his ribs like a drum. The crowd is an active participant in the duel. They scream advice and encouragement. They chant the name of their favorite. A skillful block or a narrow dodge is met with a collective gasp. A telling blow that draws first blood is met with a massive, unified roar. But if the fighters are too cautious, if they circle for too long, the crowd will turn. The cheers become gears and whistles of impatience. They demand action. The sounds of the fight itself are sharp and clear, despite the roar of the crowd. The sharp, metallic clang of a sword hitting a shield, the scrape of sandals on the sand, the heavy, grunting breaths of two men pushing their bodies to the absolute limit. The gladiator's world shrinks to the man in front of him. The thousands of spectators fade into a blur of noise and color. All that matters is the next move, the next block, the next strike. His mouth is dry, filled with the taste of dust, and soon, perhaps, the coppery taste of his own blood. In the midst of this violence, there is a strange code of honor. Gladiators are trained to be stoic, to show no fear, to never cry out in pain, to accept a blow with courage. This is what the crowd expects. They are not just watching a fight, they are watching a display of martial virtue. And then it happens. A mistake, a moment of lost footing, a perfectly timed strike. One man is disarmed, his shield cast aside, or he is wounded and falls to one knee. He knows he is beaten. He raises a single finger, the ad digitum. he has surrendered. The fight is over, but the true drama has just begun. The clash of steel ceases. The frantic music stops. A new kind of sound fills the amphitheater. It is the sound of 50,000 people holding their breath. One gladiator stands victorious, his chest heaving, his weapon held ready. The other is on the ground, wounded, disarmed, and utterly at the mercy of the crowd. He has fought bravely, but he has been defeated. Now he awaits his fate. He looks not to his opponent, but to the grand box where the editor of the games sits. Legally, the decision of life or death belongs to the sponsor. But a wise editor, who wishes to remain popular with the people, knows that this is not his decision to make. He turns his gaze to the crowd, and in doing so, he hands them the power of a god. The crowd erupts. This is the moment they have been waiting for. They are the judges. They will decide if the defeated gladiator is to be spared, a state known as misses, or if he is to be killed. They begin to signal their desire. We have all seen the famous gesture in movies, the thumbs down for death. The historical reality is a little more complex. The Latin phrase is pollis verso, which simply means with a turned thumb. This could have meant a thumb pointed up, like a drawn sword, to signify death, while a thumb pressed down into a closed fist may have signified sheathing the sword, and therefore mercy. Often, the crowd would simply wave white handkerchiefs or cloths to signal their desire to spare the man's life. The sight is overwhelming, a sea of thousands of hands, all gesturing, all screaming. The individual shouts merge into a single, massive verdict. The crowd roars, "Mit, let him go," or they roar, "Eugla, slay him." Often, if a gladiator had fought with exceptional courage and skill, even in defeat, the crowd would be moved to mercy. Sparing a popular fighter was a common occurrence. There was a practical reason for this as well. Gladiators were an expensive investment for their lanista. They were highly trained athletes, and to kill them needlessly was a waste of a valuable asset. A gladiator might only fight 2 or 3 times in a single year, and his survival was important for future games. But if the crowd is not satisfied, if the man fought poorly, or is perceived as a coward, their verdict is death. The editor sees the will of the crowd, and he gives the signal. There is no appeal. The victorious gladiator now has one final task. He must act as the executioner. The defeated man, in this final moment, is expected to display the ultimate courage. He must kneel and accept the final blow without flinching, without crying out. He might even steady his opponent's hand to ensure a quick and clean end. When it is over, and one man lies still on the sand, a solemn ritual unfolds. Attendants dressed as Charon, the mythical ferryman who carried souls to the underworld, enter the arena. They carry the body away on a stretcher, a final piece of theater connecting the games to the world of gods and myths. The hot sand is raked over to cover the blood, and the arena is made ready for the next contest. The victor receives his rewards. He is given a palm frond, the symbol of his victory. He is awarded his prize money, and he receives the greatest prize of all, the thunderous adoration of the crowd. For a moment, he is a hero, a champion. For a gladiator who survived and won again and again, there was an ultimate prize, freedom. After years of service, if he had been exceptionally skilled and popular, he might be granted his freedom by the editor. This was symbolized by the awarding of a wooden sword, the rudies. To receive the rudies was to be reborn, to once again become a man with rights and a future. Yet, the life of a gladiator was so ingrained in some that they could not leave it behind. The famous Syrian gladiator, Flamma, was awarded the rubies 4 times, and 4 times he refused it, choosing to remain a gladiator, to continue fighting, and to die in the world that had made him a legend. And so, the day ends, whether walking out as a victor to the cheers of the crowd, or as a survivor granted another day, the gladiator leaves the arena behind. The noise fades, the adrenaline subsides, and all that remains is the quiet walk back to the ludus, back to a world of comrades, of routine, and of waiting for the next time the emperor calls. The main part of our story is now over, and I hope you've found this journey into their world a relaxing one. As we settle into a quieter part of our tale, feel free to let your mind drift. Thank you for joining me so far. The great roar of the crowd has faded. The dust on the sand has settled. The stories of combat and survival, of life and death in the arena, have been told. But what happens after the story ends? What becomes of the man who survives the arena, not just for a day, but for a career? And what becomes of the world that created him when the games themselves finally fall silent? We now enter the epilogue of our tale, a quiet reflection on the echoes left behind by the gladiators, echoes that have carried through centuries into eternity. For the very few, the very lucky, and the very skilled, there was a life after the arena. The career of a gladiator was almost always short and brutal. To survive long enough to even think of retirement was an extraordinary achievement, a feat of endurance that was almost miraculous. For these men, the ultimate prize was not a palm frond or a bag of coins. It was a simple object imbued with a power far greater than any weapon of steel. It was the rubies, a plain wooden sword. To be awarded the rubies was to be awarded your life back. It was a public ceremony, a moment of incredible honor. The editor of the games, in front of a cheering crowd, would present this wooden sword to a veteran gladiator. It was a symbol that his contract was fulfilled, his oath was discharged. He was no longer bound to the sand, he was free. In his hand, a hand accustomed to the heavy, balanced weight of a real gladius. The wooden rubies must have felt impossibly light. It was the weight of freedom. A freed gladiator, now called a rudiarius, had his legal status restored. He was no longer infamous, no longer a social outcast. He could vote, own property, and make a will. He could once again be a person in the eyes of the law. Imagine the feeling of that first day of freedom. The great gates of the ludus, which had been a prison for so long, would swing open, and he would walk out, not as a slave or a commodity, but as a free man. The sounds of a normal Roman street, the chatter of merchants, the laughter of children, would sound entirely new, free from the constant, underlying clang of steel from the training yard, to feel the sun on his face, without the immense weight and constrained vision of a helmet, must have been a profound relief. To sit down and choose a meal for himself, a simple pleasure denied for years, would feel like the greatest of luxuries. But what path does a man like this take? His past is written on his body in scars. His fame or infamy follows him everywhere. True anonymity was likely impossible. Many chose to stay within the world they knew. Their combat experience was a priceless commodity. A retired champion was the perfect person to become a trainer, a doctor, at his old ludus or another. He could pass on the hard-won lessons of survival to a new generation of fighters. He understood the life, the fear, and the discipline in a way no outsider ever could. Others found their skills were in high demand as bodyguards. A wealthy senator, a powerful merchant, or a high-ranking general would pay a great deal for the protection of a famous, battle-hardened Rudiarius. It was a respected and lucrative profession, a way to use their deadly skills in a context of honor and personal service. Some, surely, tried to simply disappear, to take their earnings and buy a small farm, to marry and have a family, to live a quiet life far from the roar of any crowd. But one can only wonder if the memories, the ghosts of the arena, ever truly let them rest. And for a few, the call of the sand was too strong to resist. The fame, the adrenaline, the adoration of the crowd could become an addiction. A small number of freed gladiators actually chose to return to the arena, signing new contracts as high-priced volunteers. They were so defined by their life as a fighter that they could not imagine any other existence. They chose to continue walking the knife's edge of glory and death, even when they no longer had to. This was their world, and for better or worse, they belonged to it. The story of the gladiator is overwhelmingly a story of men. But as we reflect on this ancient world, a quieter, more mysterious echo emerges from the past. The faint but fascinating story of the gladiatresses, the women of the arena. They were a rare sight, an exotic and unusual spectacle, but we know for certain that they existed. The great Roman historians, men like Tacitus and Cassius Dio, mention them in their writings. They were not a common feature of the games, but under certain emperors. And for certain special occasions, women did indeed fight on the sand. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence is a marble relief discovered in a place called Halicarnassus in modern-day Turkey. It dates to the 1st or 2nd century AD. The stone carving depicts two female fighters in full gladiatorial armor facing each other. Their names are carved above them, Amazon and Achillea. The inscription tells us that they fought to an honorable draw and were granted release, stans misi. It is a quiet, dignified portrait frozen in stone for 2,000 years, a testament to the reality of these women warriors. They seem to have been treated as a novelty act, something to surprise and intrigue the crowd. The Emperor Domitian was said to be particularly fond of staging bouts between female gladiators, sometimes holding the matches at night by the flickering, dramatic light of torches. Imagine the sight, the vast, dark space of the amphitheater, the cool night breeze, and in the center of the sand, two women clashing in bronze and steel, the torchlight glinting on their armor. The sound of the crowd, surprised gasp at this unusual sight, must have been part of the appeal. They seem to have used the same equipment as the men, carrying the same shields and swords. Often, however, it is thought they fought without helmets. This was likely a deliberate choice to show their faces and their long hair, emphasizing the shocking contrast between their gender and their violent profession. For some traditional Romans, this was a step too far. They saw the gladiatrix as a sign of moral decay, a blurring of the proper roles of men and women in society. This controversy may be why, around the year 200 AD, the Emperor Septimius Severus officially banned women from participating in the games. Unlike the men, who were overwhelmingly slaves and prisoners, the gladiatrices may have come from a wider social background. It is possible that some were freeborn women, perhaps even from aristocratic families, who were seeking fame, fortune, or simply the ultimate thrill. The archaeological evidence for them is very scarce, and so they remain a subject of fascination and study for historians. They are a quiet whisper in the grand, violent story of the games, a reminder that the arena held many surprising secrets. Like all things, the age of the gladiator had to come to an end. The games, which had been at the heart of Roman culture for over 700 years, did not stop suddenly. Instead, they underwent a long, slow decline. Their end was like a great, drawn-out sunset, a gradual fading of the light over several centuries. There were many reasons for this. The Roman Empire itself was changing. In the 3rd and 4th centuries, the empire faced a series of profound economic crises. The immense cost of staging the gladiatorial games, which had once been a way for emperors and politicians to display their wealth and generosity, became a crippling burden. The resources, the manpower, the logistics of supplying the arenas of the empire with a constant stream of fighters and exotic animals became unsustainable. But the most significant factor was a profound shift in the soul of Rome. The rise of Christianity changed everything. The new faith, with its emphasis on mercy, compassion, and the sanctity of life, was fundamentally opposed to the spectacle of the games. Early Christian writers wrote passionately against them, condemning their pagan roots and their inherent brutality. In the year 325 AD, Constantine, the first Christian emperor, issued an edict condemning the games and ordering that gladiators be sent to work in the mines instead. But traditions that are centuries old die hard. The law was not widely enforced, and the games continued, especially in the city of Rome itself, the heart of the old ways. A powerful legend marks the final turning point. The story is told of a Christian monk from Asia Minor named Telemachus. Sometime around the year 404 AD, he was in Rome and attended the games at the Colosseum. Horrified by the bloodshed, he is said to have entered the arena himself and stood between the two gladiators, pleading for them to stop. The crowd, furious at this interruption of their entertainment, allegedly stoned the monk to death on the spot. When the devoutly Christian emperor, Honorius, heard of Telemachus's martyrdom, he was moved to act decisively. He issued a final definitive ban on all gladiatorial combat throughout the empire. The last known gladiatorial games in the Colosseum took place sometime around the year 435 AD. After nearly a millennium, the gladiators had laid down their swords forever. The animal hunts, the Venetians, continued for another century or so, but the soul of the arena was gone. The great Colosseum, the grandest stage for the games, slowly fell into disuse. Its purpose was forgotten. During the Middle Ages, its magnificent stone was quarried, used to build churches and palaces. The empty amphitheater became a ruin, a silent monument to a vanished world, with weeds growing between its stone seats, and the quiet sound of the wind blowing through its silent arches. Though the games are gone and the Colosseum is a ruin, the story of the gladiator did not end. Their memory has not faded. Instead, the gladiator's ghost has walked through our world for centuries, a powerful and enduring echo in our culture. After the fall of Rome, they were largely forgotten for 1,000 years. But during the Renaissance, as scholars rediscovered the lost texts and ruins of the ancient world, a new fascination with these fighters was born. In the 19th century, art and literature brought the gladiator back to life. The famous painting, Pallas Verso, by the French artist Jean-Léon Gérôme, with its dramatic depiction of the thumbs-down gesture, almost single-handedly created the modern image of the games. The gladiator was reborn in the popular imagination, no longer just a brutal killer, but a romantic figure, a symbol of the noble savage or the oppressed hero fighting against a tyrannical empire. The story of Spartacus, the gladiator who led a massive slave revolt against Rome, has been told again and again, a timeless tale of the struggle for freedom. In more recent times, archaeology and science have allowed us to meet the real men behind the myth. The discovery of gladiator barracks in Pompeii and gladiator cemeteries in places like Ephesus in Turkey has given us incredible insight into their daily lives. By studying their bones, scientists have been able to confirm the details of their diet, the incredible medical care they received, and the terrifying injuries they suffered. These discoveries have grounded the legend in a physical, human reality. The gladiator's ghost lingers in our world in other ways, too. The spectacle of the arena, with its superstar athletes and adoring crowds, shares a distant and perhaps uncomfortable lineage with our own modern sports. The moral questions that the games raised about the nature of entertainment, the celebration of violence, and the limits of humanity are questions that we still grapple with today. The Colosseum itself remains one of the most visited monuments on Earth. Millions of people walk through its ancient arches every year. They stand on the viewing platforms and look down at the exposed labyrinth of the hypogeum, and in the quiet hush of the crowd, they try to imagine what it was like. They try to hear the roar, to see the flash of steel. When we visit these ruins, or look at a gladiator's helmet in a museum, or watch a movie set in ancient Rome, we are connecting with this powerful legacy. The gladiator endures as a timeless archetype, a symbol of courage in the face of death, and of survival against impossible odds. And so, the gladiator's ghost walks through our world, still a faint echo on the sand of time, a symbol of a brutal past, but also of an enduring strength that still captures our imagination. Thank you for reflecting with me on their legacy. May your mind be calm and your thoughts peaceful as we drift even further now into the quiet corners of this ancient world. As we drift now into the final corners of our story, the great narrative of the gladiator's life is complete. We have followed him from his capture to the brutal training of the ludus and on to the blood-soaked sand of the arena. We have seen him win his freedom, and we have watched as his world faded into history. Now, all that is left are the echoes, the quieter details, and the lingering questions. This final part of our journey is a peaceful exploration of those details, a calm, descriptive tour of the armory of the arena, a visit with the beasts of the games, and a quiet walk through the silent theaters of stone they once filled. Let your mind be at ease as we wander through these final, dreamlike halls of history. We have spoken of the famous gladiators, the Retiarius with his net, and the Murmillo with his fish-crested helm, but the Roman taste for novelty and spectacle was boundless, and it populated the arena with a far more diverse and fascinating cast of combatants. Let us calmly picture these other, lesser-known fighters, each a master of a unique and deadly art. Imagine, for a moment, the gentle creak of a chariot's wooden wheels circling the sand. This was the domain of the East. Was Arius. He was a fighter, styled after the Celtic warriors of ancient Britain, who had so impressed Julius Caesar with their skill. The Isidarius fought from this light, two-wheeled war chariot, often with a driver controlling the horses while he launched spears or fought with a sword. Now, let the chariot fade from view, and picture a man who represents the opposite philosophy, the Democharis. This man wore very little armor, perhaps only a simple loincloth and some wrappings on his arms and legs. His defense was his speed, and his offense was doubled. He fought with 2 swords, one in each hand. The skill required for this was immense. It was a dizzying, dancing style of combat, a whirlwind of flashing steel. The Demicarus had to be supremely confident, relying entirely on his agility and his ability to parry and attack with 2 blades at once. He was a duelist in the purest sense, a favorite of crowds who appreciated pure swordsmanship. Similar to the famous Ricciarius, who used a net, was the far rarer Laquarius. This fighter, whose name comes from the Latin word laqueus, also sought to ensnare his foe from a distance. But instead of a net, he wielded a lasso or a lariat. Imagine the quiet, whistling sound of the rope as he spun it, before casting it towards his heavily armed opponent. If he was successful, he could trip his foe or bind his weapon arm, leaving him vulnerable to the dagger or sword that the Laquarius also carried. He was another specialist in the art of unequal combat, pitting speed and a unique tool against traditional armor and weapons. From the Gallic provinces of the empire came a truly intimidating figure, the Crupularius. This gladiator was less a man and more a walking fortress. He was encased from head to foot in a suit of articulated iron armor, the laraca segmentata, very similar to that worn by Roman legionaries. He was almost impenetrable to attack, a slow-moving juggernaut of metal. Picture the bright Mediterranean sun reflecting off his polished armor, making him look like a living silver statue. But his great defense was also his great weakness. The suit was incredibly heavy and cumbersome, making him slow and easily outmaneuvered. It took immense strength just to move, let alone fight within such a shell. Perhaps the strangest of all was the scissor. This was a rare type of fighter, a variation of the secutor. He carried a sword in his right hand, but his left arm was something else entirely. It was encased in a hollow steel tube, which protected the entire forearm. This bizarre weapon could be used to block and parry, but also to slash and cut in unexpected ways. It could even be used to catch and trap an opponent's weapon. He was a truly unsettling opponent, his form made asymmetrical and alien by his strange weapon. There was one class of gladiator that was unique in its rules of engagement: the provocator, a name that means the challenger. The provocateur only ever fought against other provocateurs. They were a perfect mirror match, equipped in exactly the same way. They carried a tall, rectangular shield, a sword, and a helmet with a visor. But they were also the only class of gladiator to wear a cardiophylax, a full, square breastplate that protected their chest and upper body. Imagine the intricate patterns that might have been etched into the bronze of this breastplate, a piece of armor that was both functional and decorative. Their bouts were seen as a pure test of skill, warrior against warrior, with no built-in advantages or disadvantages of equipment. For a truly bizarre and unsettling spectacle, the Romans created the ambata. This was a gladiator who fought completely blind. He wore a standard helmet, but with one terrifying modification. It had no eye holes. He would be led into the arena, unable to see, and forced to fight another ambata, or perhaps a different type of gladiator. Imagine the scene: a man, guided only by the sound of his opponent's footsteps on the sand, by the roar of the crowd, swinging his sword wildly into the empty air. It was a chaotic, clumsy, and terrifying display, less a martial art and more a cruel spectacle of disorientation and fear. Not all gladiators fought in single combat. The arena also staged larger, more theatrical battles. For these, there was the Sagittarius. This man was an archer, skilled with the powerful Roman composite bow. And there was the Velus, a skirmisher named after the light infantry of the early Roman army. The Velus fought on foot, armed with several light-throwing spears. These fighters would often participate in mock battles, reenacting famous Roman victories, turning the arena floor into a living, and sometimes lethal, stage of warfare. Each of these many types was a specialist, a testament to the fact that the ludus was not just a prison, but a university of combat, where men trained for years to master their own unique and deadly craft. The sand of the arena was not only for the feet of human combatants. Before the gladiators ever stepped into the light, the morning of the games belonged to another set of performers. The magnificent, exotic, and terrifying beasts brought from the farthest corners of the Roman world. These events were the Venations, the wild animal hunts, and they were a spectacle of a completely different kind. It was a display of the sheer power and reach of the Roman Empire, a living map of its conquests. Imagine the vast logistical network required for this. From Mesopotamia came powerful, tawny lions. From the green hills of Parthia came the striped and silent tiger. From the deep forests of Germany and the mountains of the Balkans came massive brown bears. From the sun-scorched plains of North Africa came swift leopards and towering elephants. And from the muddy banks of the Nile came crocodiles and the armor-plated rhinoceros. These creatures were captured, caged, and then transported for thousands of miles, by land and by sea, a journey that was often fatal. Their destination was the dark holding pens, the vivaria, in the hypogeum beneath the arena. The scale of these hunts was staggering. At the grand inauguration of the Colosseum, it is said that over 9,000 animals were killed over the course of 100 days of games. The Roman appetite for these beasts was so great that it drove several species to the edge of extinction and beyond. The North African elephant, once common, was completely wiped out. The Barbary lion, which once roamed the Atlas Mountains, vanished from the earth forever, a ghost species sacrificed for entertainment. The men who faced these animals were known as venatores, or bestiarii. They were not always gladiators in the traditional sense. Many were specialist performers, highly trained in the art of hunting. They were skilled fighters, and their survival depended on their ability to understand and outwit these powerful creatures. In the quiet of the hypogeum, you would smell the earthy scent of hay and animal musk. You would hear the deep, rumbling growl of a caged tiger, a sound that would fill any heart with a primal fear. Sometimes, the arena floor was transformed. Using the same elevators that lifted gladiators, the stagehands would raise elaborate painted scenery from below, a painted forest backdrop, complete with real trees and rocks, would rise magically from the sand, creating a theatrical wilderness for the hunt to take place in. The crowd would watch in awe as a bestiarius, dressed as a mythical hero, would reenact a famous hunt from legend. But not all who faced the beasts were skilled hunters. The morning hunts were also a common time for public executions. Unarmed criminals, the noxi, were simply thrown into the arena to be torn apart by starved lions or bears. It was a grim and brutal form of capital punishment, a stark reminder of the absolute power of Roman justice. To see the quiet, padded footsteps of a great cat stalking across the sand towards its helpless prey was the first act of the day's bloody drama. The Colosseum in Rome was the greatest of all the theaters of blood and sand, but it was just one of many. All across the vast expanse of the Roman Empire, from the misty shores of Britain to the deserts of Syria, these monumental structures were built. Over 230 have been found, each one a quiet testament to the central importance of the games to Roman life. Let us take a peaceful, imaginary tour of some of these other great arenas to feel the quiet echo of history within their silent walls. Let our thoughts drift south across the Mediterranean to modern-day Tunisia. Here, rising from the flat, arid landscape, stands the magnificent amphitheater of Elgem. It is one of the best preserved in the world. Imagine its golden stones, warm from the African sun, set against a deep blue sky. It could hold 35,000 people, and its walls still stand to nearly their full height. To stand in its center is to feel dwarfed by its scale, and to hear the profound silence of the desert wind. Now, let us travel north to the city of Nimes in the south of France. Its arena is so perfectly preserved that it feels as though the Romans only just left. It is still used today for concerts and other events. Imagine sitting on its ancient stone steps, feeling the same stone that a Roman spectator sat on 2,000 years ago, but instead of the clang of swords, you hear the beautiful, soaring voice of an opera singer, the notes echoing in the vast open space. The arena in Verona, Italy, shares this same fate, a place of ancient violence transformed into a temple of modern art. Let us journey east to the coast of Croatia, to the Pula Arena. It is unique for its 4 beautiful exterior towers, which remain almost perfectly intact. They stand like sentinels, guarding the arena's memories. Imagine the scent of wildflowers growing in the cracks of the ancient limestone, and the sound of birds nesting high in its arches, their calls echoing in the huge, empty space. This arena stands beside the sea, and one can only imagine the gladiators hearing the sound of the waves in the quiet moments before a fight. We can drift back in time to the oldest surviving stone amphitheater of them all, in Pompeii. Dating to 70 BC, it is a simpler, more rustic structure, but it is heavy with history. It was here that a famous riot broke out between the people of Pompeii and a rival town, an event so violent that the Senate banned the games there for 10 years. Nearby, in Capua, stood the arena that was second in size only to the Colosseum itself. It was at the gladiatorial school in Capua that the slave revolt of Spartacus began, an echo of history that gives those particular ruins a special gravity. Each of these theaters of dust and stone was a marvel of Roman engineering. With its tiered seating, the cavea, its numbered entranceways, designed to let thousands of people enter and exit with ease, and its great canvas awning, the velarium, that could be stretched over the top to provide shade from the hot sun. Our journey is almost at an end. We have toured the armory of the mind, visited the beasts, and walked through the silent stone theaters. For our final thoughts, let us return to the human element, to the most personal and poignant evidence the gladiators left behind, not in great monuments, but in simple scratches on a wall. In the ruins of Pompeii, preserved for millennia by the ash of Mount Vesuvius, is the gladiator barracks, And on the plaster walls of its rooms and hallways, the gladiators themselves left messages. These simple charcoal graffiti are a direct human link to the past. They are quiet whispers, speaking to us across 2,000 years. Imagine a gladiator in the evening after a long day of training. By the flickering light of a candle or an oil lamp, he takes a piece of charcoal and scratches his name on the wall. It is a simple human act, the need to be remembered, the need to say, "I was here." Some of the messages are boasts, filled with the pride and swagger of a successful athlete. One reads, "Celadus, the Thracian, 3 victories, 3 crowns, the darling of the girls." We can almost picture Celadus, a young, successful fighter, flush with his fame, proudly recording his triumphs for his comrades to see. Other messages are more like simple statistics, a name and a record of fights and wins, like the back of a modern baseball card. Fans left messages too, cheering on their favorites, their words of encouragement still visible after all this time. To stand in the quiet of the Pompeii ruins, perhaps at dusk, and to look at these faint, dark marks on the rough plaster, is a profoundly moving experience. You can almost feel the presence of the men who made them. They tell us of their rivalries, their friendships, and their pride. They remind us that behind the helmets, behind the armor, behind the legends, were real human beings. Men with hopes and fears, and a deep desire not to be forgotten. In these simple scratches on a wall, the gladiator ceases to be a myth. He is no longer an abstract symbol of Roman brutality or martial virtue. And with these last, faint whispers from the past, our journey comes to a close. From the roar of the Colosseum to a quiet scratch on a wall, we have walked in the footsteps of the gladiator. The story is over. The arena is quiet now, filled only with the echoes of history and the peace of the night. Thank you so much for joining me, your fellow sleeping scribe. Your presence here makes this community what it is. If you've enjoyed our time together, please consider liking, subscribing, and leaving a comment. It means the world. But for now, all that is left to do is rest. Let the story fade, let the quiet settle in, and allow yourself to drift into a deep and peaceful sleep. Until next time, sleep well.